Welcome to the mini book. Today, we're embarking on a journey into what might be the ultimate question. Is our reality truly real?
Or is it maybe something else? Like a sophisticated simulation within a grander, hidden multiverse.
Exactly. Our guide for this, pretty mind-bending exploration is Rizwan Virk's book, The Simulated Multiverse.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read. It really bridges science fiction, hard science, and some pretty bold speculation.
So we're going to tackle some really profound questions today. Like, what if our world functions more like a complex video game? Could our own memories be subtly influenced, maybe even rewritten?
And what about physics? What does cutting-edge physics actually suggest about parallel realities? There's a lot there.
There really is.
And the beauty of this discussion, I think, is how it cuts across different fields. It's not just physics or computer science.
Right.
We'll be drawing connections, between computer science, quantum physics, but also dipping into ancient philosophy, even religious thought.
To try and figure out what reality even is.
Precisely. The goal is to connect these seemingly separate dots and offer you a shortcut to understanding why these questions are becoming, more and more relevant to how we see ourselves in our existence.
Okay, so let's start with something relatable. Rizwan Virk shares some personal stories from his own time in virtual reality.
Ah, the VR experiences.
Yeah, he talks about playing virtual ping pong, totally engrossed. And then at the end of the game, he instinctively tries to lean on the table, the virtual table.
Which isn't there.
Right. Nearly falls over. His brain was just completely fooled by the immersion.
And that's not just anecdotal. Studies actually back this up. They show the brain responds to virtual stimuli almost exactly like it responds to real physical stimuli.
Wow.
It's why VR therapy can work for things like phobias. You can safely simulate the fear in a controlled way.
Virk also mentions another one, standing on a virtual ledge, looking down into this, bottomless chasm.
Like the Mines of Moria reference.
Yeah. And even though he knew intellectually that he was safe in his room.
His body reacted. Fear of heights kicked in.
Exactly, that visceral reaction. So these experiences got him thinking, what would it actually take? What elements do you need to build a world you couldn't tell apart from physical reality?
And are we getting close to that point? What he calls the simulation point.
Right. He actually mapped that out more in his previous book, The Simulation Hypothesis, but it sets the stage here. Now, shifting gears a bit, if you've ever thought about glitches in reality, you might have stumbled upon the Mandela effect.
Ah, yes, the Mandela effect. It's definitely gained traction online.
So this is where a whole bunch of people, like a significant number, share these vivid memories of something.
That just isn't true. It contradicts the factual record in our shared reality.
The classic example is Nelson Mandela himself. Loads of people remember him dying in prison back in the 80s.
Yeah, they remember news reports, even funeral details. But of course, he was released and died much, much later.
And Fiona Broome, a blogger, she coined the term, right? And the internet just ran with it, collecting tons of examples.
It did. Now, let's say, conventional explanation usually involves things like faulty memory, confabulation, suggestion.
Sure, makes sense. Our memories aren't perfect recordings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Virk takes a different angle. He uses it as maybe a compelling illustration.
Of what?
Of the possibility of multiple timelines. Timelines that might branch off, maybe even merge back together within a simulated multiverse.
So like a digital Mandela effect.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine different characters or instances in the simulation being loaded with slightly different background histories, but ending up in the same present. That could explain these shared yet incorrect memories.
Like a glitch in the matrix, basically.
That's the analogy, yeah.
And the book lists some really intriguing examples beyond Mandela, like the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Some remember it happening in 85 or 83.
Instead of 86, yeah. Or the Tiananmen Square tank man. Some people have vivid memories of him being run over, seeing blood, and then communism falling shortly after.
Which didn't happen that way.
Not according to our established history, no.
And it's not just big events. It's spellings, logos.
Oh, yeah, the small stuff is almost weirder sometimes.
The Monopoly Man. Does he have a monocle or not?
Most people say yes, right. But he doesn't. Never has.
Or Curious George, tail or no tail?
No tail, but people remember one.
Yeah.
And Pikachu's tail. Yellow with a black tip.
Nope, all yellow. Kit Kat with or without a hyphen.
No hyphen in the logo, but people remember it.
And the Berenstain Bears. Always remembered as Berenstein.
That was huge. Verk even mentions some Jewish families specifically remembering it as Berenstain and discussing the Jewish spelling.
It's fascinating how widespread these are. Even things like geography, New Zealand's position relative to Australia, or religious texts.
Right, the Bible verse, "The lion will lie down with the lamb," Isaiah 11:6.
Everyone knows that phrase. There are paintings, objects.
But the actual text says, "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb."
Wolf, not lion. Wow. Or the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses.
Versus the actual "forgive us our debts" in Matthew's version.
And even physical objects like Rodin's The Thinker.
The pose. Hand on forehead or under the chin.
Many remember it under the chin, maybe a clenched fist. But photos, even from Rodin's time, like one with George Bernard Shaw in 1906, show the hand on the forehead.
So Verk's point isn't necessarily that these prove anything definitively,
Right.
but they serve as compelling thought experiments. What if these aren't just memory errors? What if they're traces of slightly different versions of reality, different simulation runs, perhaps?
It really pushes you beyond the simple explanations.
It does. It leads you straight into the core idea. What if this, all of this, is a simulation, like a giant video game?
Which sounds like sci-fi, but the idea itself is actually ancient.
Oh, absolutely. It goes way back. You've got Plato's allegory of the cave.
Right, the prisoners mistaking shadows for reality, very Matrix-like, with Morpheus offering the red pill.
Exactly. And then René Descartes, centuries later, wondering if an evil demon was tricking his senses or if he was just dreaming.
Leading to, I think, therefore I am.
His bedrock of certainty. And Bishop George Berkeley argued for idealism, that reality depends on a mind perceiving it.
And more recently, philosophy has concepts like the brain in a vat thought experiment.
Yeah, or even the Boltzmann brain, the idea that in an infinite universe, a conscious brain could just randomly assemble from particles, all questioning the nature of perceived reality.
But it feels like it really exploded into the mainstream more recently.
Definitely. Pop culture played a huge role. You had The Matrix, The 13th Floor, Existence Z, all came out in 1999, interestingly.
A big year for simulation movies.
It really was. The Matrix especially gave everyone this powerful visual metaphor. Humans unknowingly living in a simulation run by machines.
But then came the more rigorous arguments.
Right, Nick Bostrom's simulation argument in 2003. That really shifted the conversation into serious philosophical and scientific circles.
Explain that one again, the ancestor simulations idea.
So, Bostrom imagines future, highly advanced civilizations. If they have enough computing power, they might run incredibly detailed simulations of their ancestors. Us, potentially.
Okay.
His argument is statistical. If these civilizations can exist, and they do run many such simulations, then the sheer number of simulated conscious minds would vastly outweigh the number of original biological minds.
To the odds are.
That any given conscious mind, like yours or mine, is far more likely to be one of the simulated ones rather than an original biological one in base reality.
You laid out three possibilities, right?
Yeah. Either civilizations tend to destroy themselves before reaching this simulation point.
Okay. Plausible.
Or they reach it, but for ethical or other reasons, they choose not to run ancestor simulations.
Also possible.
Or the third option. They reach the simulation point and they run lots of these simulations.
And if that third one is true,
then we are almost certainly living in a simulation. That's the statistical punchline.
which sounds like something Elon Musk would say.
He did. Famously stated, the odds we're in base reality are 1 in billions.
And his reasoning is based on video games.
Pretty much. Look at the progress. From Pong, literally a dot and two rectangles just, 40, 50 years ago?
Right.
To today's photorealistic 3D worlds, massive online RPGs, deeply immersive VR and AR. The trajectory is just astonishing.
So if you just extrapolate that improvement,
Even at a slower rate, Musk argues, it seems almost inevitable that we'll reach a point where simulations are indistinguishable from physical reality. And if we can do it, chances are someone else already has.
okay, let's connect this to computers then. How does that work?
Well, think about how video games represent their worlds. It's all information, right? A game state.
Like positions, properties, everything captured as data.
Exactly, bits of information. And computers do something called context switching all the time.
Jumping between programs.
Right. They save the exact state of one program, load the state of another, run it for a bit, then switch back. It's seamless.
So you could theoretically context switch between different timelines or realities in a simulation. Load a different game state.
That's the analogy, yeah. It fits really well with physicist John Wheeler's concept of it from bit.
Meaning?
The idea that the universe, at its most fundamental level, isn't matter or energy, but information. That physical reality arises from bits, from computation.
Which makes a digital simulation seem less far-fetched.
Considerably less, yeah. If the universe is information, then simulating it is just manipulating that information.
Okay, so if it's a simulation, where does the multiverse idea fit in? Are they connected?
Deeply connected, especially when you bring in quantum mechanics. Physicists talk about different kinds of multiverses. Well, there's the idea of higher dimensions from string theory, like we're shadows in a higher dimensional space,
Right.
or expanding bubble universes from cosmic inflation, where maybe the laws of physics are different in each bubble.
Which helps explain why our universe seems so fine-tuned for life. The anthropic principle.
Exactly. If there are countless universes, it's not surprising one happens to have the right conditions for us. But the most relevant one here is probably the quantum multiverse.
The many worlds interpretation, MWI.
Right, proposed by Hugh Everett III.
Yeah.
It's an alternative to the older Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Which said observation collapses the possibilities.
Kind of, yeah. MWI offers a different take. Remember superposition. A particle being in multiple states at once. Schrödinger's cat being both alive and dead until you look.
Uh-huh.
In MWI, looking doesn't collapse anything. Instead, every time a quantum measurement or choice happens, the entire universe splits into multiple branches. In one branch, the cat is alive. In another, it's dead. Both outcomes happen, just in separate parallel realities.
Creating this massive tree of branching timelines.
Exactly. Every quantum event spawns new universes where each possibility is realized.
Okay, that's already pretty weird. But then there's the delayed choice experiment.
Ah, Wheeler's delayed choice. Yes, that takes the weirdness up another notch.
So the idea is you decide how to measure a particle, like whether to see if it acted like a wave or a particle.
After it should have already decided how to behave.
Yeah, after it's past the point of choice, like going through one slit or both slits in the double slit experiment.
And the truly mind-bending result, proven experimentally, is that the measurement you make now seems to determine how the particle behaved in the past.
It changes the past.
It certainly appears that way. It challenges our whole notion of linear time and causality. Some call it retrocausality.
A future cause affecting a past event.
Precisely. Wheeler even imagined this on a cosmic scale. Light from a distant quasar bending around a galaxy.
Millions of light years away.
And a choice we make today about how to observe that light could influence the path it took millions of years ago.
That's hard to wrap your head around.
It absolutely is. But the implication, relevant to our discussion, is that the past might not be fixed, and multiple potential futures might exist simultaneously in some sense.
Which ties back perfectly to a simulated multiverse.
It aligns remarkably well, yes. If the past isn't set in stone and futures branch, it sounds a lot like exploring different paths in a complex simulation.
So how do we model this computationally, these branching realities?
Well, first, think about time in a digital simulation. It's not necessarily a constant flow like we perceive it.
It's more like steps, clock cycles.
Exactly. Computational steps or operations. Think of the twin paradox in relativity. The traveling twin ages less.
Because time moved slower for them.
Or, in simulation terms, maybe they just executed fewer program steps than the twin who stayed put. Time experienced is relative to computation performed.
Okay. And the branching.
We can visualize it using something like a multiverse graph, an idea explored by people like Stephen Wolfram. Each node in the graph is a possible state of the universe, a game state.
And the lines connecting them.
Those are the edges, representing the computations or rules that transition the universe from one state to the next. And crucially, these graphs can branch out, showing multiple possible next states and sometimes even merge back together.
Branching and merging timelines visualized.
Precisely. It gives a framework for thinking about how multiple realities could evolve computationally.
But why? Why run a simulation with all these branches? What's the purpose?
That brings us to the idea of the core loop. Think about why we run simulations now. Often, it's to find the best outcome.
Right.
Or to learn from different scenarios.
Especially for complex problems where you can't just calculate the future.
Exactly. What are called computationally irreducible processes. You have to actually run the simulation step by step to see what happens. You can't predict it with a simple formula.
Okay.
A good analogy is genetic algorithms in computer science. You start with a population of solutions, you make variations, you test their fitness, keep the good ones, and repeat. You evolve towards an optimal solution by trying things out.
Like evolution itself.
Very much like it. And modern AI does this constantly. Think of Google's AlphaGo Zero learning the game of Go.
It just played itself
Right.
millions of times.
Billions, actually. It ran simulations of countless games, exploring different strategies, learning what worked, discovering moves no human had thought of, all through this iterative simulation loop.
Or Tesla training its self-driving cars.
Yeah, feeding its AI, dojo, massive amounts of real-world driving video, plus simulated scenarios to learn how to handle every possible situation, optimizing for safety, efficiency.
So the universe itself, could it be running a kind of core loop?
That's the speculative leap. Maybe reality is a recursive process, constantly running scenarios, exploring different possibilities, perhaps evaluating outcomes according to some goal we don't perceive.
And the ultimate machine for running these kinds of parallel explorations would be a quantum computer.
That's where it gets really interesting. Quantum computers don't use classical bits 0 or 1. They use qubits.
Which can be 0 and 1 at the same time. Superposition.
Right. And because of that, and another property called entanglement, they can perform calculations in a fundamentally different way. Quantum parallelism.
Meaning they can explore many possibilities at once.
Essentially, yes. It's like they can run computations across many of those parallel universes described by MWI, all simultaneously. It's an incredibly powerful way to simulate complex systems, including quantum systems themselves.
Which Richard Feynman envisioned decades ago.
He did. He realized simulating quantum mechanics would require a quantum mechanical computer. And another key feature, quantum operations are generally reversible.
You can run them backwards.
Theoretically, yes. The underlying physics allows for it. There was even an experiment in 2019 that managed to effectively reverse the state of a qubit, like turning back time on a tiny scale.
So you could rewind timelines in a quantum simulation?
Potentially. It supports the idea of exploring different paths, maybe even undoing choices. The ultimate idea here is that the universe isn't just like a computer. Maybe it is a giant quantum computer.
With particles as qubits, computing its own evolution.
That's the grand vision some physicists and computer scientists are exploring.
Okay, let's bring this back down to Earth. Or maybe not Earth, but us. What does all this mean for you, the listener?
Right, the personal implications.
Verk revisits this idea. Are we non-player characters, NPCs, just part of the simulation's background? Or are we playing a role-playing game, an RPG, as an avatar?
Two very different perspectives on our agency.
If we're NPCs, maybe our individual lives still contribute to some larger goal of the simulation. Like the movie Free Guy. Ryan Reynolds plays an NPC who starts making choices and changes his world.
A fun take on it, yeah. Even as an NPC, actions can ripple outwards. Maybe this simulation is testing big questions. Will this civilization figure things out or destroy itself?
But if it's an RPG...
then life is more like a game designed for us, the players, with challenges, quests, opportunities for growth. Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, had that famous quote about games.
Simple to play, hard to master.
Exactly. The challenges make it interesting. They push us to develop skills, wisdom, whatever the game is designed to foster.
And this RPG idea, it connects surprisingly well with some spiritual concepts, doesn't it?
It really does. Think about Eastern traditions like reincarnation, the idea of souls downloading into bodies.
Accumulating karma?
Right, a record of actions like stats or achievements in a game that persists beyond one life or level. You see echoes in concepts like the Scroll of Deeds in Islam or the Book of Life in Christianity too.
And then there's the research around near-death experiences, NDEs.
Yeah, the clinical work by people like Dr. Brian Weitz or Dr. Michael Newton using hypnotherapy and documenting NDE accounts. It's fascinating stuff.
What do people report?
Very often, they describe things like life reviews, not just watching their life, but experiencing it almost like an interactive simulation.
Interactive how?
They report being able to fast forward, rewind, even go sideways, explore what might have happened if they'd made different choices, seeing the ripple effects on multiple timelines.
Wow, like reviewing game footage to learn.
Exactly. And some describe life planning sessions before incarnating, previewing potential lives, challenges, roles, sometimes visualized like watching multiple movie screens showing different paths.
That sounds incredibly similar to running simulation scenarios.
It aligns strikingly well with this idea of a spiritual simulated multiverse. Major life choices creating branching timelines, all potentially viewable or reviewable from some control panel outside of our physical reality.
It makes you think about all those what-ifs in life. The road not taken.
Definitely. Blake Crouch's novel Dark Matter explores this powerfully. A physicist meets an alternate version of himself who made a different key choice, pursued career glory instead of family, by literally jumping between universes.
Which life was better? It becomes complex.
It does. And it leads to this final provocative thought. The universe might genuinely be, as Borges described it, a garden of forking paths. Time constantly dividing towards countless futures.
So if our universe is a quantum computer and maybe we as conscious agents are running our own kind of core loop,
Perhaps we are constantly, maybe unconsciously, trying out these timelines, searching for the best path, learning, evolving.
and maybe phenomena like the Mandela effect aren't just errors, but hints that we've been using the wrong model of reality all along.
It's a profound possibility. What if our fundamental understanding of cosmology, time, and consciousness needs an update?
So to quickly recap, we've journeyed through the idea that our reality might be a vast computation, one that's potentially branching, merging, maybe even being rewound and rerun, possibly driven by some underlying purpose or learning process.
And whether you take that literally as fact or see it as a powerful metaphor, it absolutely pushes us to think critically, to question the nature of reality, the significance of our choices, and our place within this potentially unimaginably vast system.
It definitely gives you a lot to mull over. We really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, keep questioning your own perceptions of what's real.
It's a fascinating rabbit hole to go down.
It really is. Thank you for joining us for this mini book.